I have to kind of pop into podcaster mode a little bit because we have to introduce you. This is Monica, who I have already spoken about in the episode that's coming out prior. You can find out about Monica via a new blog on Cry's website. Just go to our blogs tab at filmcry.com. And Monica interviewed someone for us. We're going to do solo episodes, as I mentioned previously. But before we do that, I think we're going to try this new thing that we've been interested in, and that's just talking about things we're noticing. But yeah, before we dive into the interview, let's give it a shot. So, Monica, all right, caveat. Obviously, AI is going to be a thing that everybody wants to talk about. So I know on my end, I'm going to try to limit AI stuff, but that doesn't mean you can't talk AI if you have things to talk about AI.
I don't personally have anything to talk about AI-wise. I will say in this episode, Megan Cunningham talks about AI a little bit, not a ton, but she says some really interesting things that I would say are encouraging about the future of AI and how it relates to the advertising space. So
great.
That's pretty cool.
I think I saw on Twitter today, the first fully AI music video was trending. I don't know if you saw that.
Really?
Yeah, but it's interesting, the discussion about it. And again, we'll keep it to things we're seeing in regards to advertising. I think I'm going to accidentally shift here. So what things did you notice recently in the filmmakers in and or advertising realm?
I have been noticing a lot of intersection, which actually does tie into this episode quite a bit, with the storytelling space of advertising. I feel like more brands are leaning into immersive storytelling and or celebrity endorsements, which is a totally different avenue. But those are the two trends that I'm really seeing right now, especially since the Super Bowl ads, really. And I think something that I specifically noticed is that it looks like brands are leaning into longer spots. Like, I'm sure they can't put it on TV, but I've noticed a couple of 2-3 minute spots that are online right now. Like for this one company, Lindex, they're an underwear company, and they have a whole campaign out right now called Underwear for Life, and it follows this woman's journey from like being a preteen until she's got her own kid. So yeah, that's just really interesting to me.
And when you say celebrity, what was the example you used? Flo from Progressive, where they make their own celebrity versus just renting an existing celebrity status?
Yeah, I noticed this during the Super Bowl quite a bit, that there were a lot of existing celebrity endorsements instead of creating your own kind of celebrity that's based in the brand. Like you said, like Flo from Progressive or the Geico Gecko or those kinds of characters. It's more like Paris Hilton or like Michael Cera or those kinds of celebrities that are, I feel like, being recruited to endorse a brand.
Got it. So we might be seeing less Jake from State Farm. Did you have anything else that you've been noticing?
Just some more things in that space. I really liked CeraVe. I know they did that Michael Cera campaign for the Super Bowl, but they just did one. It was really good. I really loved it. It was fun. But they just did one that was kind of like a 2-minute long short film about this woman trying to find love, and she falls in love with her CeraVe lotion that has SPF in it. And it was just, I don't know, it was just really fun. It was this 2-minute long story, but it was entirely based around CeraVe. So I really do think brands are leaning into this whole storytelling aspect of things.
Yeah. All right. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Maybe we can give that a shot on our next one. On my end, maybe we should have brought Jake in. We'll bring Jake in next time to see this, to see what we're seing.
Jake from State Farm?
No, Jake from Film Cry, but that was good. Don't know if you'll know this one. Have you heard of Helldivers 2?
Honestly, no.
That's sorry. That's okay. Nope, don't be. Helldivers 2 is kind of taking over the video game underground or just video game sphere. And as far as the reason I'm mentioning it here is because they've done something that a lot of people have never seen before. I've never seen it. I don't know if anyone's even done it before, but the layers of meta involved in their advertising are they just give you a huge grin because the game starts, and I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't had the experience. I'll try to keep it vague, but the game literally starts with an advertisement every time you fire up the game. And it's awesome. They have this opening video. By the way, side note, this is a long shot campaign at getting myself and or us involved when they do their live action commercial. So I'm just going to come right out and say that right now. But what they're doing, it's propaganda more than it's advertising, but the similarities with the propaganda that they're using in the game are in a very uncomfortable way, quite relative to maybe stuff that the US military does, or just any military around the world in general. And in a very weird way, this game has the best word of mouth campaign I've ever seen before in gaming, maybe aside from God of War Ragnarok or something, because of their in-game advertisements and the fake commercial that they have at the beginning of the game.
Is it the same commercial every time?
Every time currently, and you never tire of it. I would bet a stack of money that they're working on their next commercial though for in the game, because people love it. That's what I'm seeing, and it's just a way that I've seen people having fun with it. They also run this Helldivers 2 Twitter account, and they use Twitter. Oh, excuse me, X, Twitter, whatever. They
are people calling it X?
No,
who's
they're not
calling it that?
No, I don't know. Elon is the only person who calls it that. But they tweet stuff out, and people they gobble it up. What they're doing, the meta-ness of it all, between the commercials in the game, the advertisements in the game while you're playing the game, and how they're using social media, incredible.
Yeah, it sounds like a really well-rounded marketing strategy. That's really dynamic.
Yeah. And that's what's amazing. The last thing I'll say is I don't think they have marketing, and they don't even need it, which is so weird, because one of the strongest points of it is marketing in the game. It's very, very intriguing to see. Anyway, Monica, can you give us a quick overview of your discussion with Megan Cunningham? What did you guys talk about before we get your interview started?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to talk to Megan Cunningham, who is the founder of Magnet Media. It was a really, really interesting discussion. So Magnet Media's whole foundation and mission is based around storytelling and data to drive organic growth. So we talked about Magnet Media's Think, Make, Reach approach to storytelling, which I think is really interesting and is making me think about these longer campaigns that I've been seeing online, like the ones I mentioned earlier, and just about how to integrate them into more advertising. We also talked about how Megan's passion for storytelling developed. And then towards the end of the episode, we talked about the biggest mistakes that filmmakers make when approaching brands about storytelling ideas, which was really interesting to me. And I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, she seems like someone who would visit a college course on advertising. She seemed extremely smart. So I think you got a good one here, especially that last part you mentioned.
Yeah, she's got so much knowledge, and she's so concise with her information, and I was very grateful to talk to her.
Awesome. Well, I guess on that note, we're going to start that interview. So everyone, this is Monica and Megan Cunningham.
A garden of pure ideology.
Yeah, just your typical Super Bowl car ad.
Or a hilarious beer ad.
Break was over 15 minutes ago, Mitch!
I think you're the best ever.
Look down. Back up. Where are you?
You're in the bush.
Well, how am I supposed to know? I've never been there.
I don't always drink beer, but when I do...
Wanna play Bobby?
I think we're going to be here a while.
Thank you for being here with us, Megan.
Absolutely, Monica. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I know that you've been working in film and brand storytelling and advertising since you graduated from college. That was impressive to me as somebody who graduated and then freelanced for a long time before I got into the advertising space. Did you always know that you wanted to work in media, or did you have a previous life before advertising and production, or a different passion growing up?
Yeah, I think early on, I was passionate about storytelling, and I think I became increasingly obsessed with storytelling as I got older. My mother was an English teacher, and my parents both just avid readers. They really came from humble backgrounds, but were very committed to kind of fostering, intellectually curious kids who were contributing to the world and giving back, and sort of that storytelling and values alignment. I think I came directly from that upbringing. But when I started out in my career, I think initially I was thinking, okay, storytelling, I love creative writing. I want to be a writer. And then very quickly, my very first class in college was actually taught by a visiting professor from NYU teaching a class called Women in Documentary. And I watched these films that I'd never been exposed to before. And they were radical feminist films and, guerrilla activist videos and just things and stories and creative voices that I just had never had exposure to before. And it really changed my whole career trajectory. And yet at the same time, when it came to the television side, that corporate media environment was very at odds, I would say, with the way in which I was oriented. It was very structured, and as most corporations are. And there's nothing wrong with that by any means, but it was very difficult for me to work in that environment. So at that point, I was talking to one of my mentors who was a phenomenal editor, Larry Silk, in the documentary world. And he said, Megan, you're really creative and you're really hardworking and, you really have a lot to offer. And I felt like, oh, finally, someone's seeing me. and of course, he's like, but everyone else in this very elite circle that you find yourself in is also very creative and also hardworking and also has a lot to offer. So the thing that makes you stand out is you're really good at computers. And he said this from someone who was challenged himself with the transition to digital, and he had grown up in a very analog and sort of tangible filmmaking world. And so he saw me as this whiz kid, which was very funny because I came from a liberal arts background. And I thought, my God, if I'm the most technical person here, we're all in trouble. But what that gave me in terms of an indication was, oh, that's something that's being perceived, even if it's not something that I feel. And so why don't I actually go live that dream of okay, I can be a technically savvy innovator. And I worked for a while. I left temporarily the production world to work at a tech startup that was servicing the entertainment industry. So then I had credibility. And so when the internet came, which just sounds so silly, this is all sort of pre-broadband being ubiquitous, YouTube came onto the scene and, fast follow with social networks. And all of that stuff was really obvious to me that the entertainment industry was going to be completely disrupted. Whereas a lot of the people that I had been working with, I think were kind of seeing it as, frankly, the ghetto of content creation and not necessarily the future. And so that gave me a competitive advantage. But early on, I would say that I never would have seen my trajectory going from independent film and documentary to running a brand storytelling studio. That wasn't necessarily what I predicted, but I think opportunistically, I found myself along the way telling stories and really loving it, using the strengths that I had.
There's just so much in there that I want to talk through. But my first question is, would you say that working at that tech startup was really the defining moment and the turning point for you to get into brand storytelling and digital marketing? Or was there something else that happened in that time period or shortly after that really changed that momentum for you?
It's a great question. I think it's a combination. If I had to simplify it for a minute, where when I was working in independent film, I loved working with creators. I loved the process of creating something, telling a story that nobody had heard before. I'll quote Sheila Nevins, who I interviewed for my book, who used to run HBO's documentary division for many, many decades. And she said, the beautiful thing about a documentary is you open a door and you don't know what's going to be on the other side. And it's that process of discovery and exploration and surprise and delight. It was just thrilling for me. And so I loved that organic storytelling and sort of the mystery of filming without a script and, all those things, right? It was endlessly interesting and stimulating for me. When I came to the startup, it was much more that spirit of discovery and making something new and building towards a vision. But it was with a completely different basis, which was, it was a commercial ambition. It was obviously a for-profit company. It was with all kinds of technical nuances and challenges that I had to learn as we were growing. So that part was fascinating. And then as I started Magnet, I really combined both of those, the storytelling and the tech. We still say to this day, 20 years later, we use data and storytelling to drive measurable impact for brands. To me, the combination of that storytelling and the tech was really the big insight. It sounds very clean at this point, but it did not feel that way along the way. It felt like I was like fumbling forward, but I'm really grateful for having so many people be open-minded about taking a chance on me and the things that I was able to do along the way.
That's incredible. And I loved what you said about storytelling and curiosity, because I feel like that is something that I find I love to bring to every project. So it's so refreshing to hear that other people in the industry are also coming at it with that perspective. And you mentioned Magnet Media. So in your words, because I know that you founded this company and you've been working with it for so long, what exactly is Magnet Media?
Magnet Media is a brand storytelling studio. And so what that means is that we have a proprietary approach to helping brands maximize the impact of their communications through digital storytelling. And so the approach is a think, make, reach approach. We use strategy and production and what we know about all the different channels and places that brands can show up to reach audiences. A list that is growing, I will say, every day with the metaverse and spatial computing and live events and hybrid events, right? But all three of those, from strategy to production to distribution, all under one roof, is sort of what is our secret sauce. A lot of times brands, when they're trying to figure out their marketing plan, they either just jump right into a cool idea and then they wonder why it didn't take off, or they work forever on a strategy that is left to gather dust on the shelf because people are in the corporate boardroom going through frameworks and audience analytics and stuff, and they're not necessarily making its way over to the creative. So the thing that really makes us stand out is the fact that we have strategy, production, and distribution all under one roof. Think, make, reach.
So when a brand comes to you, do they normally have a particular vision in mind, or do you kind of work with them on what would serve their brand the best based on your existing knowledge? What is the process, or is it different with everyone?
It really is different with everyone, and it's also changed over time. So when we were first starting to call ourselves a storytelling studio, people were super confused by that. They were like, you can't be a storytelling studio. That's not a thing. Right? It's like, are you a production company or are you an agency? And we're like, well, we're neither. And we're also both. The fact that we are defining a new category gave us a chance to tell our story. And the idea of using data and storytelling together resonated with the markets that we service. So we're very focused on really three distinct types of brands. Those that are in the technology sector, like Google or IBM or Adobe. Those that are in financial services, like JP Morgan Chase or Citadel or Apollo, and those that are in a sort of purpose-driven, mission-driven space, like Chief. We're working with a number of really interesting, fast-growing startups like Greenhouse in that capacity, and they are for-profit companies, but they have a real purpose and mission that aligns with ours, which is our mission is to tell stories that matter so that we live in a more equitable world. And so the fact that, some of those brands are sort of adjacent to tech and finance, they're not really firmly tech companies. They may be in the startup category or just more purpose driven. That also sort of qualifies them as something that we can, with credibility, apply our think, make, reach methodology and help them tell their story.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I want to ask specifically about why you wanted to choose a studio with a focus on storytelling, on the think, make, reach. Why not just make an agency or a production company like you said? What was it about the aspect of storytelling as a whole that really drew you in when you were founding this company?
Yeah. I mean, I think, look, every element of starting a company is so challenging. that if you're not passionate about the subject matter, you're definitely not going to be successful, right? And even if you are passionate, you also may not be successful. But having passion, I think, is one of those table stakes ingredients. Lots of people come up with good ideas, but if you don't have sort of that stick-with-itness of that obsession of this is going to be a solution that's going to change the world, really hard to make it through all the ups and downs that a startup presents you with. And so with that, storytelling is definitely my life purpose. The storytelling, the mission of the company is very much like my personal mission. And I think that at the same time, it also is timely in this moment in time. All brands know at this point in 2024 that they need to tell their story. It's rare that it's possible to succeed in business without having a really well thought out story that is consistently being told by every member of your team, whether they're in sales or customer service or your executive team. You may be telling the story slightly differently, but if you're telling a totally different story, that's a disconnect that will eventually be sniffed out and you'll be canceled online, or there'll be dysfunction in the organization where the salespeople are selling something that the customer team doesn't know how to deliver. So that alignment that storytelling provides and that strength and clarity of the brand, I think, is so key and powerful and essential. But I would say that it's a relatively recent development that the storytelling elements have been so valued.
Yeah, so take me back to that first time. How did you get brands on board with the storytelling aspect? What was it that really sold them on that when you guys were first starting out?
So this is going to sound funny, but Apple was our first client. And the reason why I think it's funny is because today, it's like the world's largest, right? Everyone would say like, whoa, you didn't start out with some, Joe's Pizza around the corner. It's kind of shocking. But we were very fortunate to have Apple as our first client. And at the same time, Apple, this is pre-iPhone and pre-retail store. So it was a much different company back then. They had a small fraction of total market share of the computer market. It was very much a PC and Microsoft driven world, right? And at the same time, I think part of the reason why they hired us and part of the reason why we were bolstered by that match in terms of a client base was because they were real innovators. They saw what we saw in terms of the way in which storytelling was going to be a force multiplier, that, there were lots and lots of laptops out there, but if you could really get into the quality of the titanium and the possibilities for creating an Grammy award-winning album on your laptop, you don't need a whole music studio. You can just make it out in your bedroom. That vision is what Apple represents. That vision and story needed to be brought to life for them to be able to charge, frankly, a significantly higher price for their computers when someone would just walk into a retail store at the time, right? This is before they had their own retail stores, and say, well, okay, that one's $2,000 and this one over here is $700. Why would I do that? Why would I buy something that's so much more expensive? And so if you had that story in mind, they knew that that was a strength that they needed to lean into in order to validate their sort of superior stance in the market and their higher price. And so I think that's, to me, like, it was a business strategy, and it was really eye-opening and really educational to say, oh, storytelling can create value.
And so as Apple grew, did you stay on as their brand storyteller? So I'm just wondering, like, how that story that you guys helped them establish carried through their trajectory as a brand and your trajectory as somebody that was helping them create that story.
Yeah. So they definitely were one of our biggest clients early on, and we did a lot of different projects with them. It was mostly in the pro apps division. So filmmakers and musicians were just starting to use digital editing tools beyond iMovie, but like Final Cut Pro and beyond. So it was like they were definitely building up their pro apps division. That was something where we were providing educational materials and customer stories and engaging that community on the B2B level, right? Or B2P, because it was like professionals. I don't want to make it seem like we were their exclusive partner. We were working with one, group, and we did a ton of great work together on a global level. But I was also, I took the lesson that I was taught from my last company, where I joined as employee number 2, and we grew to be a really significant force in the market, that we really needed to diversify our client base so that you weren't vulnerable, right? As they decided to make a turn in their strategy, we didn't want to be sort of left holding the bag. And so I was working very aggressively early on to build off that single client from day one. And so we formed a really nice roster of clients over the first 10 years.
So when Magnet Media first started, did you ever expect that it would be what it is today?
Absolutely not. Did I have like a total clear vision of like what our company would be like? But I will say over time, I think that one of the things that we did extremely well was that we had a incredible team from at every era, right, of the different strategic eras that we had over the decades. And we were able to be responsive to the changes in the market. So again, we were founded in 2000. When 2005 came and YouTube was on the market, for the first time, bought by Google, everyone's attention was turned to video. We were one of their first calls on the East Coast because they said, we hear that you can tell brands that we're more than cat videos. So we had made a name for ourselves in like these very large and impressive firms. But at the time, those tech companies are obviously like a lot smaller than they are today. And they also didn't have those sort of market power or presence that they have. And so we were, again, able to grow with them. Separately, I would say that when the social media era started, shortly after that, Facebook, Twitter, in 2006, 7, 8, we were there to help educate brands on how social media was going to be impacting their strategy. So we always had that sort of think, make, reach approach. And we were always, I think, very much having sort of a pulse of where things were headed. And we became known for that in this space. I think that as far as what we do today, it's a lot more mature in terms of our business, right? We know, okay, what are the 5 types of videos that every brand needs, right? We know how to produce not only videos, but podcasts and social content. We are activating at incredible venues like the World Economic Forum at Davos, at Cannes Lions in France. We're bringing brands to these, incredible global venues and helping them tell their story on a much more large scale global level. And I think that to me is the evolution of the company.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You keep mentioning the beginning of YouTube. Was that really kind of the first shift in the industry where you noticed that brands were having to kind of like scramble and change their strategy? And has it changed every time a new platform gets introduced, or is it pretty consistent with the way that everybody had to shift to YouTube and everybody's kind of used to shifting at this point?
I mean, I definitely think that there are some brands that are intentionally late adopters and they do not want to be on any new platform because they are so either risk averse or limited by compliance and regulatory guardrails. So I don't think that every time there's a new platform, it's like every brand runs over to be on it. But I definitely think that there are some that have made their name by sort of breaking new ground, being the first to show up there. And there is such thing called a first mover advantage by all means. So there's risk associated with that, but there's also a payoff. As far as YouTube being a threshold moment, I definitely think in the 2000s, they were still in building mode. They were still sort of finding their way in the world and whether or not they were going to be a professional platform or a place where, just sort of goofy UGC videos were produced was a big question mark. And then it really wasn't till later on that the creator economy sort of emerged as like, wow, this is going to be a place where content is monetized and that people are going on a regular basis, and that's the world's second largest search engine, right? Those were sort of later insights that helped them command greater power with brands.
And it's so interesting because now I can't imagine a world without YouTube. So I want to shift back to storytelling because when we first met, you were doing a talk at a film festival that I was attending called Starable Film Festival, and you were doing a talk on the state of the story. So could you explain what the community is and what your yearly meetings are and what's been coming up in the past year for the state of the story?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So the state of the story is a couple different things. We have a trends report that we come out with on a fairly regular cadence. around sort of changes in brand storytelling. And it is a community where we gather with both sort of private salons around thought leaders and specific topics, as well as an annual summit where we together conversations with leaders in storytelling, leaders in tech, and leaders in brands. And it's all about this migration from advertising to storytelling. I think I say that in, sort of wink, wink, knowing that there is a lot of gray area in that spectrum. But from our perspective, sort of traditional advertising, and I mean this in the kindest way, the sort of Don Draper era of advertising grew up as the media industry grew up. From our perspective, that space in the very traditional way is really challenged right now. And I think that if you think about where attention has shifted, it's right to mobile and digital in every way, and to streaming platforms in every way. And so some of the more, I would say, original platforms like print media, billboards, linear television, they're increasingly on a decline, right? And also having the challenges of migrating to the new technology. So we say that advertising is blocked, skipped, avoided in its traditional sense, its purest original form, and that storytelling is shared, celebrated, and frankly underutilized. And so from our perspective, that transition is what the State of the Story is about, sort of working off of a old playbook. How do you adopt it without throwing out all that's good about it? Because of course, there's wonderful things about advertising, and that's a very meaningful part of every business's investment. And without it, I think most businesses wouldn't exist. So it's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's about thinking through carefully how to strategically make decisions around your investment portfolio and invest in things that can show a return.
Yeah, that sounds so fascinating. And I've known about the State of the Story for quite some time. I'm wondering, you mentioned trend reports. How do we get access to those trend reports? And where can we find them?
Thank you for asking. Yes, there is a section of our site where we offer sort of the State of the Story reports, and you can come on over and download. I will say in the next 6 weeks, we are actually going through sort of a bit of a renovation in that area. So there'll be more features and functionality so that you can have access to the latest research that we're coming out with. Right now, a lot of it's restricted for our clients, but we're sort of updating that and opening it up so that more people can enjoy those insights.
That's so exciting. And is that kind of how the annual Story Summit goes as well, where anybody can sign up and join and attend? Or is it also held exclusively for your clients or for people who are part of the community?
It's a combination. There's the salons. We have different sort of guardrails depending on the scale of the event. So some of it's designed as like a private roundtable with a senior leader from TikTok, and you sort of get, access to that as being sort of part of our client base and community. And other things we're doing, it's much more open. We really love meeting new creatives and, diversifying our network of people that we work with, as well as, of course, different types of brands. So I would say come to our site and sign up for the newsletter, and we will definitely put you on the right invitation list. We do quite a bit of event coordination throughout the year.
So it really is kind of like tailored to each person and what their goals are.
Exactly. We don't want to be spamming everyone about, sort of finance events if they're in sort of the creative space or whatever it is. So we try to be diligent about how we build our communications.
That's amazing. That really does feel like a community. We've talked a lot about advertising versus brand storytelling. And I'm wondering what the impact of brand storytelling is versus that traditional advertising. I know you mentioned that traditional advertising is kind of getting overlooked, and I want to know where you're seeing the trends of brand storytelling impact communities and consumers differently than traditional advertising.
Yeah, I do think it's a both and. I will say that, just to be clear, it's not like one is replacing the other. I think it's a more expansive approach.
That's a great clarification.
I also use the idea of a portfolio because I do feel like, again, it's putting all your eggs in one basket is never a smart way to approach, right? Anything, but especially when it comes to the increasing fragmentation of audiences. If you're only on YouTube and your entire strategy is all about just having the world's greatest YouTube channel, you better be very, very specific about how you are going about that and sort of have a financial justification for that kind of like platform exclusivity, and be prepared if like things change radically within that environment that you may be caught off guard and that you're exposing yourself to that risk. So I love YouTube. I think more brands should be on YouTube. But I think that in terms of thinking through all the different parts of a marketing storytelling strategy, it's really critical to say, okay, who are we reaching and where are they spending time? And then how are we telling our story in that place that they are spending time? So for perfect example is a consumer brand that is trying to reach, let's just call it, their target audience of Gen Z gamers. YouTube might be a great place to find them, and also Twitch. So they could like kind of mix it up. You also might have an approach on Reddit or TikTok. So kind of having a platform agnostic approach that is also using the environments that people are spending time in, and then having something completely separate if you're a large enough company that you have investor relations, for example, or a talent strategy, right, for recruiting, completely separate from those consumer efforts. You might be telling your story differently with a different voice, but with the same sort of basis on LinkedIn. And so thinking through each of those platforms and who is on those platforms and what is the story that you want to tell to the people who are on those platforms is really what the work of our strategy service is.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Do you always start with the story of the brand and then go to the goals for the quarter or the year?
I mean, it can vary depending on who we're talking to, but if we're talking to a senior leader at the company, let's just say the CMO or an SVP of marketing, generally knowing what the vision is and what the objectives are, business goals, that's kind of where we start. And then from there, under the think, there's really kind of three phases. It's the business goals, the data, and the strategy that we put together. Under the make phase, there's another three phases where it's the planning, the development of content, and the creation and production of it, right? So you asked earlier, do people come with the content? Sometimes, but usually it still requires planning and development as well as creation and production. And then under reach, we have three other phases, which is the distribution and audience engagement and measurement and optimization, right? So each of those three phases, think, make, and reach, has sort of three subsets during the process. And as we take them from left to right, from the very beginning of the business, goals definition all the way through to reach and engagement and optimization, where we have some milestones and process moments in that execution so that a campaign goes as smoothly as it possibly can.
That's great. I know earlier you mentioned Cannes Lions in France, and then I know South by Southwest just happened. So I'm wondering how brands are showing up to these spaces where filmmakers and storytellers are in, and how storytellers can really position themselves to connect with brands in an organic way.
So in terms of how brands are showing up, I think that the brand world is very diverse. So brands show up differently depending on where they are in their own trajectory and what their objectives are for the year. So an entertainment brand may show up at South by Southwest very differently than a beverage brand. But as far as connecting with filmmakers, I feel like filmmakers have a real opportunity at this moment in time when most brand leaders know how important their storytelling is to do a little homework. Before going to these events, figure out who's going to be part of that event. You can very easily see who the sponsors are and who the speakers are, and then approach the brands directly, even through LinkedIn ahead of time and on site, with that knowledge and with that sort of opening of, this is what I know about you and here's what I think, this is why I'm interested in talking to you, and kind of get a foot in the door, largely by coming prepared and thinking through what that brand is doing well and where they may have new opportunities to tell their stories in different ways.
Yeah. So is it kind of like, I'm familiar with your brand and I have these ideas, or is it an approach like what you're talking about where I would love to talk to you about where you're at with your storytelling journey and how we can work together to enhance it?
I mean, it can be either for sure. It depends, again, on the sophistication level of the brand, how much work has to be done. But I do think that a lot of times what I hear as creatives approach brands is that they come in kind of blind with like, there's someone from Coca-Cola. Here's my card. I'd love for you to check out my portfolio. And they're talking a lot about their own work, which is, of course, valuable. But it would be even more valuable if take two, approaching someone at Coca-Cola. If I say, listen, I just saw your Super Bowl spot, or I just saw this incredible thing that you're doing with influencers on YouTube, and I have some ideas on how you can take that to the next level. Would love to set up a brainstorm, or would love to hear more about what your goals are for the year and come back to you with some ideas. You're building a relationship. You're not just trying to jump to a transaction of like, hire me.
So what do you think is the biggest mistake that filmmakers make when approaching brands, other than lack of just knowledge and research and previous connection?
I mean, that's definitely a big one. I will say the second thing that I would say is a lot of times filmmakers who have not worked with brands before misunderstand what value they would offer to a brand. And so a lot of times we hear filmmakers approaching brands who just view them as sort of a sponsor for their existing film or series. And I think that that's really difficult for a brand to come up with the money, even if they wanted to, just based on the way a brand thinks about their filmmaking their sort of video strategy. And without distribution or an audience, it's like next to impossible for that to work.
In that sense, how do filmmakers take the next step to make sure that they are talking to brands in a way that it's mutually beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to the research. I don't mean to be repetitive, but I think that, I do feel like there is so much information out there that didn't exist when I was coming up in the industry that you have access to today. And so you can do a tremendous amount of background research and come prepared to these conversations. And so if you're not showing up that way, then somebody else probably is. So I feel like that's pretty table stakes these days when it comes to sort of creatively matching your own talents with the needs of a brand marketer.
So I know that we've been talking for a while, and I just want to ask a couple of questions to kind of wrap things up. But the first one that I'm so curious about is, what is your favorite part of your job?
Oh my gosh, it's a tough question. I like so many aspects of what we do.
And I know that you work in so many different spaces, like you're one of the founding members of Chief, and you are committed to the State of the Story and also Magnet Media. So what is your favorite part of all of the positions that you hold? And is there something that's cohesive between them, or does each one hold something different for you?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I love innovation and I love creativity. And I think that when I am most fulfilled by my work, it is when I'm doing one or both of those two things. So an example is last year, we knew that AI was obviously years before that. We knew that AI was on the horizon, right? And generative AI was getting a lot of buzz in our circles. And then, of course, when ChatGPT dropped, it was very obvious to the rest of the world that this is going to be something that's transformative. But so many people, I felt like, were reacting with fear. And legitimately, there are very real concerns about kind of what AI means for all of us as humans. So I don't mean to dismiss that. But I also think that what was overlooked was the opportunity. And there are so many opportunities that AI presents for creators. And so we decided to roll up our sleeves, and I structured a AI bootcamp at Magnet Media, just within our core team, where we did a lot of diligence and research and sort of had a program week over week where we met as a team and progressed with learning different tools, exploring different concerns, having dialogue and debate, and trying things out, piloting some of these efforts to see what time could be saved, what creative opportunities are opened up. For our podcasting service, we're going to be unveiling something where in a very compressed time frame, you can have your podcast that you've so carefully recorded and so specifically thought through and edited, now available in 10 languages using your voice. exquisite, high quality translation. That opens up a whole new audience for anyone who has a podcast. And to be able to do that for our clients without having to hire 10 different translators is pretty extraordinary. Now, we do not believe that at this point in time, at least, that the idea is AI to come in and replace jobs. We believe in the opposite, that it is going to expand the opportunities for services. And with that, will actually be a job creator. It certainly will require that jobs are transitioned, right? That you're no longer doing a lot of the tedious work that, frankly, nobody ever wanted to do. It was, sort of tasked with at the, beginning and sort of entry level of their career. And so now I feel like people can do higher quality work that produces more value. And with the right AI tool set, to me, the future of our industry is really bright. So it's a very long-winded way of saying that I love innovation, I love creativity, and I am very bullish on the future of AI storytelling.
Yeah, we didn't really get a chance to talk about AI, but one of the things that you mentioned is the jobs that nobody wanted to do originally with AI. So I'm wondering what some of those jobs are and what you've seen AI to be helping with for those kind of more tedious tasks.
I mean, I think the list is endless, right? It's like everything from transcribing the outtakes of a video. Certainly that was a job that I did early on in my career in documentary and was exhausting and didn't make me feel very good about the amount of value that I was delivering to this project. It was extremely tedious, very time consuming, and frankly can be done instantaneously, right? And I think that while it's becoming increasingly automated, I think the way in which AI is now improving these tools is really nothing short of magic. And so there's a massive list from my perspective of all the things that AI can do. In fact, that will be our big report that we're coming out with at the State of the Story of how AI co-pilots are enhancing the quality of creative work. And
then I guess
it's pretty exciting.
Yeah. What would you say to people who are more on the fear side of things, especially creatives?
One thing that a colleague of mine said was that AI is not coming for your job, but someone who is working with AI tools may be coming for your job. I thought that was a really good sort of mindset shift. This is going to be something where anyone who values efficiency and also values creativity and iterations on creativity is going to be using these tools. So I think it's not a question of if, but when in terms of getting on board with using the tools. As far as the fears are concerned, I think that there really does have to be serious treatment of all the bias that's built into these models. That, for me, is the biggest fear and the biggest concern. I'm lucky enough to be working with some of the people who are doing big AI for good and responsible AI initiatives. And so that is something that hopefully will be addressed. It's critical. As is the IP concern, right? There's more lawyers probably working on AI than any other category right now, largely because of the way in which things got started. But I do feel like those are two very real concerns, and the solutions need to be imminent.
Yeah, I love that you said the, AI for good initiatives. The fact that there's a lot of push to be more intentional about it is really refreshing. So my next question is, what do you wish you had known when you were starting out? Like if you could talk to your 18-year-old self, knowing everything that you know now, what do you wish you had known then?
I'll go back to the piece of advice that my mentor gave me, which I still tell people to this day because it's really an evergreen piece of advice, which is so much of people who are on their way up, sort of climbing the career ladder, so to speak, or career jungle gym as it's become, is focused on impressing those above you, right? Those who are in positions of power, those who could potentially hire you one day, etc. Whereas I feel like the real power in our industry especially is getting to know your colleagues, getting to know the other filmmakers, the other creatives, and even your peers at brands who are not necessarily more advanced than you, but sort of at your level, right? The brand managers, the directors of marketing, right? And this is not necessarily the CMO. So that to me, kind of putting a focus as you think about your own network and sort of expanding your relationships within the industry on your peers, I feel like that's a superpower. And I wish I had known that earlier. And I think that as I advanced within the industry, that was something that I really put a lot of energy and attention into, getting to really bond with people who are my peers.
Yeah, I love meeting people that are on the same level as me and growing with them. And I think it's so important. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we wrap up? Anything that is coming up for you in the advertising space, in the brand storytelling space? Or do you feel like we've kind of covered everything?
I think I'll just say one last thing, which is, again, close to my heart. The effort to put more women and people of color behind the camera and in creative storytelling roles and in all roles within your crew, I think needs to continue to be a top priority. I don't think it's a top priority for most companies or most leaders. And I really do feel like that piece of our evolution is critical. And if you don't want to buy in on a values level, if that doesn't seem to like resonate for you as far as like, okay, this is something that needs to be done for equity in the world to exist, I think that you should do it selfishly because it's the right thing from a business perspective. This is a risk mitigation strategy. This is a market opportunity strategy. This is a talent opportunity strategy. You know, it is difficult to find high quality people. And if most of the world is seeking out male candidates and most of the world is seeking out white candidates, and you are recruiting from a pool of outstanding people of color or outstanding women, you are going to be able to get the best. And so I think that to me is this justification level, one of the real reasons behind diversifying your crew and being mindful about it. And it's been a key part of our success for sure, having diverse teams and being increasingly intentional as we've grown about those teams. Been essential to the success of Magnet.
That is so great to hear, and I couldn't agree more, and I'm so glad that you said that. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask what the best way to approach you is for anyone who wants to reach out.
Absolutely. I have a very active life on LinkedIn, and so you can certainly connect with me there. I also just signed up as an expert on The Intro. So it's a relatively new app where people who are seeking mentorship can get access to those that offer mentoring. And so you could book time with me directly through that app.
That's amazing. That's great to know. And I will make sure that we put those links in the podcast notes.
Awesome.
Well,
Monica, this is so much fun. No, I want to thank you. You're an excellent interviewer, and I really appreciate the thoughtful questions. It was really fun to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much, Megan, for sharing your time with us. We hope you enjoyed this episode with Megan Cunningham. You can find links to her websites and social media profiles in the show notes, as well as links to her intro and LinkedIn profiles that she mentioned. If you have any guest recommendations, please let us know on Instagram or Facebook or via review on Apple Podcasts. From Cry, a creative production and post house based in New York City, I'm Monica, and this is Filmmakers in Advertising.